Hi, I'm Susan Beattie, the author of Luke's Adventure Series, and I'm here today at the South Florida Science Center and Aquarium. And I'm here with Chris, the Director of Education, and Luke, of course, because Luke likes to visit all the museums and some of the sanctuaries. So Chris is going to take us through, and we're starting here with the planetarium, and this is often featured in the books, especially Luke's Everglades Excursion. And we have Luke's Adventure in Space coming out soon. So let's get started, Chris, and tell us a little bit about this fabulous setup here.
So this is our planetarium, and if you've never been to a planetarium before, a planetarium is kind of like a movie theater, but instead of the screen being in front of you, it's above you. And it's a big, huge, like half circle called a dome. And if you have a screen like that, it can let you do a lot of cool things with your videos. It makes it feel like you're in the picture as it's going on. It's also a really great place to talk about things like space, where you have to look up and see things like stars and planets. So what you're looking at now is what we do a lot of in the planetarium. We talk about space and what you can see in the sky, especially at night. So if you look up in the sky at night, you see really cool things like stars. Sometimes you see the moon. If you get really lucky and it's super dark outside and you don't have a lot of lights on around you, you can see this strip of light called the Milky Way. And if you look at those stars in the night sky and you use your imagination, you can connect the dots between the stars like they used to do a long time ago, before we had electricity and before everybody had, TVs to watch and Netflix and video games and stuff. So at night, you just kind of sat outside, looked at the stars, and used your imagination to make shapes. We call these shapes constellations. So what we do at the planetarium is we talk about what shapes are out there, which ones you can see at certain times of the year, and we tell you the stories that go along with them.
I'd like to mention about the book Luke's Everglades Excursion, when Luke and Greg go camping in the Everglades, and they look up at the night sky, and Greg teaches Luke a little bit about the stars and the sun and the moon and all of the solar system, but also they talk about light pollution and how that affects the animals. Chris, can you tell us a little bit more about that? And we can probably see on the screen.
Absolutely. So what you're looking at is a picture of what the stars would look like with no light pollution whatsoever. And where we're talking about light pollution, we don't mean garbage floating around in the sky. What we mean is, if you live in an area with lots of people, just because those people it gets dark and the sun goes down, it doesn't mean that those people are going to stop what they're doing and just go straight to bed. So if you're doing stuff at night, you need lights to see by, like headlights if you're driving, lights in buildings, that kind of stuff. And all that extra light down here on the ground reflects up into the sky, and it kind of blocks out some of the starlight. It makes it brighter than it would normally be at nighttime. So not only does that make it harder for us to see the stars like this, but also it can confuse some of the animals. They think it's daytime when it's actually nighttime. So when they should be sleeping, they're up doing stuff, they're trying to find food, things like that, and it can really confuse them and make it harder for them to do what they need to do.
Another feature in many of Luke's books, as you know, Luke is the door greeter at a jewelry store, so he sees a lot of gemstones and artifacts and many things coming into the store with customers looking. And he learns that gemstones have their origins in planet Earth and outside planet Earth. There are some space gemstones, also known as extraterrestrial gemstones, that have their origins traced to outer space. These gemstones happen to be found on planet Earth because they fell from outer space. And these gems that get their origin from outside Earth are called space gems.
So this is our Mars rock, and we didn't get this from a robot that went to Mars or people that went to Mars and brought it back. But sometimes out in space, you have chunks of rock that are floating around. And sometimes they smash into each other and break off little pieces, and those little pieces fly around in space. And sometimes, if we get really lucky, they land here on Earth. So we found this piece of rock floating through space, and when it hits the Earth, we call it a meteorite. And scientists were able to study the types of rocks that were in this meteorite, and they found out that it actually came from planet Mars. So we have this teeny tiny little piece of the planet Mars that made it all all the way across space and fell right here on planet Earth. Now, if you want to see a really big meteorite, we'll show you that one in a second. But we also have a rock from the moon. And the moon rock was brought to us by an astronaut who lives here in Florida named Edgar Mitchell. And what they did is they went to the moon a few times over a few years, and they studied the moon and they brought back rocks so that we could learn more about what the moon is made of and how it's compared to the rocks here on planet Earth.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the books that I write about with Luke's adventures. He loves to see the fish. And a little bit about Luke's Shipwreck Treasure Voice, talks about the different ocean life, and we're going to hit on the Everglades when we walk around to another exhibit. But let's start here.
This is called Shipwreck Cove, and this is our largest tank. When you first walk into the Science Center, it's the first part of the aquarium you see. It's got some really cool fish in there, including sharks. We've got a really nice moray deal all the way down to the other end, and we even have a really cool shipwreck that a lot of the fish like to hang out in. All right, now we've got a little nurse shark hanging out right over here. We've got some leopard sharks. So we're getting to one of my favorite areas of the aquarium. The tanks in the aquarium are set up to have different kinds of fish in each tank. Some of them are from different areas of the world, different oceans, and some of them are from different kinds of habitats. So this one right here is our seahorse corral. And this is one of my favorite tanks to look at because every time you come, it's kind of like a scavenger hunt. The seahorses, they like to hide among the little corals and some of the fixtures in the tank, and they wrap their tails around so they don't float away in the current, but they're really good at blending in. They have great camouflage. So when you get to this tank, it's always fun to see how many of the seahorses you can spot. Our next tank is called the Jewels of the Sea, and this is where we have a lot of the really pretty, bright, colorful fish that you'll find in the Pacific Ocean, like this one right here, the blue tang. If you've ever seen the movie Finding Nemo or Finding Dory, that fish probably looks really familiar. That's the kind of fish that they base Dory off of. But all in this tank, you're gonna see these really bright, colorful fish, our little blue chromis over here, some damselfish, and these are the really pretty fish that if you ever go scuba diving and looking at coral reefs, a lot of these really colorful fish are what you'll find out there. And right next door, we have this tank called Hidden Creatures. These are all fish that really like to spend their time out of sight. They like to hide, they like to find little holes in the rocks or in the coral. Some of them will even dig themselves a little bit under the sand. So they like to hide out because they're not, they don't want to be seen by predators or anything that eats them. And some of them, like our clownfish right here, they will even live in anemones that have little stinging tentacles that nothing else can get into, but they don't hurt our little clownfish. These guys are really beautiful, but they can also, you have to be careful around them because they're poisonous. And there's a difference between something that's poisonous and venomous. You ever hear those two words? Venomous means that if it bites you, you get sick. Poisonous means that if you bite it, you get sick. If that makes any sense. So this is one that you've probably heard of a lot, especially recently. It's called a lionfish, and it's a beautiful fish. It's really, really pretty to look at. But we're seeing them a lot more in Florida. They're called an invasive species. And that means that these fish don't live here naturally. They were brought over through pet trade. Sometimes they get released accidentally. And there's nothing in our waters in Florida that will eat these guys. And they're really good at living and surviving in Florida with nothing to eat them. So now we have a bunch of lionfish, and it makes it harder for some of the other local fish to find enough food and to find enough places to live. This tank right here is also a really fun tank. This is called Under the Boardwalk. And if you've ever been to a dock, if you've ever gone fishing or been on a boat, you'll notice that under the dock, there's a lot of fish swimming around in there. Docks provide shelter and shade and security for fish, especially small fish that don't want to swim out in the really deep water. It's a place that they can feel safe. So you'll see a lot of things happening around there. And this is also one of my favorite tanks because we've got some really cute little puffers in there. And puffers have great personality. If you come look at them, they'll follow you around. And they're almost like little puppy dogs of the ocean. Like Luke is a puppy dog. These kind of remind me of dogs.
This is another one of my favorite exhibits here in the Everglades. You'll read a lot about these animals in Luke's Everglades Excursion, a lot about the Florida panther, but I'm going to let Chris explain a little bit more about this exhibit. As you see, Luke he camps and then he hears the animals at night. And he also sees the big black bear print in the sand the next morning.
So our Everglades are really close by. If you live in South Florida, you can drive to them in like an hour, maybe 2 hours. You can see a completely different type of habitat than what we have here closer to the cities. And the Everglades is very unique. And when we say unique, that means that you're not going to find it anywhere else. You're only going to find this particular kind of habitat right here in the Everglades. The Everglades is a really good mix of a bunch of different types of places where animals can live. You have the freshwater swamp, and all throughout the swamp you have a little bit higher places called hammocks, which are like little islands in the Everglades that a lot of animals can live on. So there are tons of different kinds of animals in the Everglades, which is one of the reasons it's so important to South Florida, because it's home to a lot of different animals and a lot of different creatures. But just like we saw with our lionfish, where we had some invasive species that are trying to take over out in the oceans around Florida, we also have some invasive species in the Everglades. Luke found out about them when he learned about the Everglades, the pythons, these snakes that can get really, really, really big, that people get as pets, and then they get too big for them to take care of, so they let them go. And the pythons love the Everglades because there's tons of things for them to eat. There's lots of places for them to live, and there's nothing out there that really eats those pythons. So they get really big, and they make it harder for those other animals to find them out the pool. But here you can see all the different kinds of animals that live in the Everglades, especially if you like birds. The Everglades is your place to go. You're going to find some really pretty birds and a lot of rare birds that you won't see a lot of other places in Florida, because birds, they migrate, right? They move from place to place throughout the year, and the Everglades is a really big rest stop for a lot of those different birds on their long, long journey.
We're outside now at the Fisher Family Science Trail, and there's all kinds of fun little sections to go to experience. Solarscape and physics forest, but right now I just want to focus for a minute on dinosaurs. This is a storyboard, and this is Luke's dinosaur excursion. And what Luke does is he actually goes back in time, and he actually finds a prehistoric shark tooth on the beach while walking with Greg. So this is kind of fun for him to see the dinosaur display. This is fun because you can actually pan for some rocks, and I'm not sure if they have gold, but if you're familiar with Luke's Gold Rush adventure, he does find gold. He pans for it. But also we'll look at some of the gemstones over here. So again, you know that Luke knows a lot about gemstones. Maybe one day he will actually be a gemologist. So here you have can actually go and dig for these. There we have, and a lot of these are in his books. The amethyst and labradorite. Look, that's what's on Luke's collar. He has his own labradorite gemstone because that gives him magical powers, and that's how he's able to go all over the world saving animals. So that's exciting to see that, right? Moonstone. Peridot, that's in the book. Opal, rose quartz, rubies, sapphires, topaz. Actually, my ring is a pink topaz, so that's fun. I think I said emerald. And all of these gemstones actually have healing qualities, which you'll read about in Luke's books. And this shows where they're located. This is why Luke goes all over the world. When a customer comes in and either has a gemstone that they would like made into a piece of jewelry, or they want a particular gemstone, maybe a birthstone, that's how Greg and Luke help them. And then that's how Luke starts thinking about other places in the world. So look, this takes you to all of these all of these countries, many of them are featured in Luke's books. Australia, that's coming up real soon. China, we have a book coming out about the pandas and different. We have Egypt, of course the United States, and South America with his rainforest book. So this is fun. We're inside now. They show this great movie about walking with dinosaurs. And if you look over here, let's see it on the big screen.
This is our own Earth during the Triassic period. Here there are no separate continents, just one giant landmass called Pangaea. It is a harsh place, dominated by deserts.
Now again, Luke does go back in time to save the dinosaurs. Look, oh goodness.
The Triassic has already seen many different varieties of ancient reptiles come and go. And now, out of this dry wilderness has appeared something revolutionary. A
This
family
is
of
great.
reptiles
This
destined to
goes
shape
through
the
all
course
the
of
different
life
periods.
on Earth for the next.
This is all about the hurricanes and natural disasters. And that's another thing that Luke does in the books, is that he saves and rescues animals after hurricanes, floods, and even wildfires. So not only does he rescue wildlife from people that harm animals intentionally, he also helps to save the animals that unfortunately are affected by natural disasters. So this kind of just shows a hurricane and what happens. I want to thank Chris for taking us around all of the exhibits here, and also invite the children and bring your parents and come out and see this fantastic facility that, as I said, I've been coming here since I was a child in elementary school. And I brought my children, and now I bring my grandchildren here, and Luke. So it's all a lot of history here at the Science Center. So come on out and visit. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for visiting.